Levi Fuller, welcome to State House Podcast. You are most recently an assistant AG, and we're working on the human trafficking border issues quite a bit, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But you are now transitioning to Chief of Staff for Representative-elect Hopper. And so in just a couple of weeks, less than 2 weeks, you're going to be a whole new job and a whole new location. So, and it's going to be kind of a crazy session. But we had a conversation a little while ago about the border issue and in particular human trafficking. And, I was really kind of blown away by a lot of the stuff that you told me. And I wanted our viewers and our listeners to hear a lot of the things that we talked about. And because I know this is it's such a huge issue now, particularly with deportation, sort of the next phase of this coming up and how this is going to impact Texas and the country, but Texas in particular, and what's been going on, as we're heading up to January 20th with the new president coming on board. So, one of the things maybe, and you can tell me if this is the best place to start, but one of the things I think that was the most interesting to me, this is when you told me about the whole process, that, where it starts, where, the people that are involved from both sides, and, who's funding it and all those. And so I'll let you kind of take it from there, because you in your head, you've kind of got this, you've been doing it so much, you can probably tell us, what's the most important thing you want to cover first.
Well, I hope so. We'll see. But yeah, so, kind of the starting point for this is basically just to understand that this whole thing is funded by our tax dollars, the whole thing. It kind of starts, there's a trail that starts in Ecuador, where there's about 4 countries that are qualified for the parolee, the asylee status. It would be Haitians, Hondurans, Guatemalans, El Salvadorians. There's a couple other entities, or a couple other countries, Venezuelans. And so it would start in Ecuador. They take a boat to what's called the Darien Gap, which is around Panama. Okay. It's about, I couldn't tell you how long it is, but it's basically just a death trail. It makes, the Trail of Tears, Ho Chi Minh Trail, it's on par with that for human atrocity. They go through the Darien Gap. They will, once they get through there, they get in close to the Mexico area. They get through the Mexican border. They'll pick up, they'll ironically get an ID in Mexico saying who they are, because it's a crime to not have one. And they'll get transported to these holding areas. And there's an individual, Todd Bensman from the Center for Immigration Studies, who's written a lot about these holding areas in Tapachula. And from there, it's like sort of an NGO bazaar, a non-government organization bazaar.
Is this the place you were telling me is kind of like a big stadium?
That's right.
And it's sort of like a, all the NGOs are there, and trying to get people to sign up with them.
It's kind of like a farm. Yeah, it's kind of like a farmer's market or a job fair, except for they're just giving out stuff. Yeah, they're trying to. I mean, it's everything from like bank cards to medical supplies to maps, clothes. I mean, everything. They're all down there, and it would be a hell of a charitable event if the whole purpose wasn't getting them what they needed to get up to us.
Right.
And so from there, they'll run into legal and illegal entities who will put them on this path. And some NGOs, I'll avoid some names, but there are maps down there. I would say anybody who wants to know who's involved can go to muckraker.com. I give them a shout out. Anthony Rubin's got all the maps posted up, all these documents that are out there, and so you can get a map that literally shows you all the trails, all the routes, every way to get from the southern tip of Mexico up to the southern tip of Texas. One way that they'll take these random bus routes, or they'll take car routes, or they'll board what's called the death train going north, and they'll get off the train and start heading towards the border. And once they get to the border, you still have to pay a plaza boss. You still have to pay cartel folks to get through these border towns. And then from there, they're picked up by our American NGOs, and then they're funneled in. They're collected by the American NGOs, and they're sent throughout the country, often by American NGOs. So the whole thing is, south of the border, you'd have IOM funds, the immigration office with the UN, UNHCR would be down there, and then once they get to the United States, they'll have, it'll be FEMA and DHS. Will be funding it.
So these NGOs, and just for our listeners and viewers, is non-governmental organization.
That's right.
So it could be anyone from Red Cross to whoever. I mean, anybody helping to do the kind of work that they'll do. But all these NGOs are getting money from multiple sources, right? I mean, they're getting FEMA money.
That's right.
They're getting money from. Are they getting money directly from Texas in any way? Is there a route that Texas is giving them money by some chance?
In some cases there are, and it would be kind of, like local municipalities, local cities would be funding some of these entities.
Okay.
And but I think one of the biggest problems with the funding would be sort of a lack of accountability. In the sense that, I'll just talk about FEMA, because you can go to usaspending.gov, which is a public website. It's a government-run website. You can see where these grants are coming from. The money would go south to, it would be part of the DHS and FEMA. It would be part of the EFSP, the Emergency Food and Shelter Program.
Okay.
The idea is to give all this money to border communities, so that way, whenever these folks come across the border, these local communities that are just swamped with thousands of people can get them food, get them a place to go, get them off the streets. Well, what the NGOs were doing, what they were doing was a lot of them were sending money south of the border. Well, at that point, it's a different kind of ball game. It's not helping the local community.
Okay, that was the piece that I remember was talking about that was shocking is sort of the crossing of the line.
That's it.
So you have these NGOs that are here in the U.S. and they get money and they're trying to do good things, provide them with some healthcare stuff and give them some help, food, clothes, and maybe shelter and all the food and all those kind of things, because the counties and cities where these folks are coming into can't handle it. They don't have the money. We know counties and cities don't have a bunch of money, particularly counties. And but then what you found is that money that was coming into these NGOs on the American side, but then sending them over to the Mexican side and essentially assisting people to come over. That's right. to the American side. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, and that's it. Like, they would take the money south of the border, they would sort of entice or encourage these folks to come across, and to add a layer onto that, the NGOs would have a seat at the table in Washington. So they're sitting there saying, hey, we need more money to help facilitate this problem. And then they're going down there and exacerbating the problem, essentially. Things like setting up, there were a couple that were setting up these sort of congregation grounds, these areas that these folks would go to in places like Reynosa and Matamoros. And they're almost like collection points, because they know once they get to the southern border, and I anticipate this will change very soon.
Yeah.
But once you get to the checkpoint and you go through, and they're using an app, a lot of them are using an app. So it's a USCPB1, I think is what it's called. They'd set up an appointment, and so they would have to kind of just wait until their appointment time. So they would just wait in these campgrounds, and then they'd come across Border Patrol, USCIS stamps them, makes them an asylee, or later on, I think it was parolee.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is somehow,
and they have to. So you have the Border Patrol. So if you look at Texas, which is kind of a conflagration of all this stuff, you have the U.S. Border Patrol, which has been told by their boss, the Homeland Security Director, you have to, if they touch American soil, you need to process them.
That's right.
Right? But then you've got Texas through the Texas DPS, trying to keep them out. And so people probably saw a lot of the stuff on TV, where you had the park down there in Eagle Pass, where you had, DPS putting up, razor wire and all kinds of stuff, and Border Patrol cutting it,
right.
Which is like, I think a lot of people are like, what is going on? How does that work? And I thought we were all on the same team, and we've not on the same team. We haven't been at least for the last 4 years. And And so that's caused quite a bit of problem. Now something I heard that things have slowed a little bit because of the, but that doesn't mean that there's not a bunch of folks that are already sitting in camps on the Mexican side just ready to come over, right? They're still there.
Right. And here's the thing. So, obviously a lot of credit goes to Governor Abbott. He did a lot of things, but really the Attorney General has been pushing a lot of these cases to ensure that the governor can put that razor wire down to stop the border NGOs. General Abbott's really kind of done yeoman's work there. But yeah, there is a large contingent that is still south of the border. Leading up to one of the big factors that I thought was just incredibly interesting was leading up to the election, the numbers started going down. And, then all of a sudden Joe Biden shows up and he's like, well, we've solved the problem. Well, anybody who's been in government knows that, as you're aware, government doesn't hand out money to people who aren't going to do something with it generally. Sometimes sometimes they do the wrong thing with that money.
Yeah.
But you could actually go and look and see what some of these allotments, some of these prepaid grants were going to be for some of these NGOs. And it was going to be double what it has been the past couple of years, from 19 million or from 9 million in one instance to like 17 million. So the plan
for 2025.
Right.
So leading up to potentially for Biden, they were going to have double the budget.
That's right.
So they could then just take everybody and get them over.
That's right. And that's all public information. All you have to do is just go to you can see what the allotments are with the federal government. And so that's what they were. I noticed early on that, hey, look, these guys are getting double the cash next year. So this problem is being artificially deflated. And that's what it was. The State Department or whoever, the federal government, went down to Mexico and was like, hey, hold them back because I guess just the election. But once, had Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever was in charge of this country at the time, if they'd won, then that floodgate would have opened and it would have been a flood like we would never have seen. It would just been catastrophically horrible.
Yeah.
And it would have, all that money going south would not have been enough the border towns would have got crushed. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. And I guess what's really worrisome about a lot of it is how all this money has really benefited the cartels. That's who's made all the money down
That's
there.
right.
And you had talked a little bit about, kind of their business model on how the cartels work. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so, I think, one thing I'll say is I know a lot of people are trying to do the right thing. They're in this space. So there have been some statements of like, the government's funding the cartels. And that is true. But there's a little bit of nuance there. Like, Joe Biden is not going down and handing Pablo Escobar a check. Mm-hmm. Basically, the way this kind of is going is the federal funds are going towards these NGOs, going towards certain banks, going towards certain programs to provide goods, services, check cards, cash cards to get refilled once every 2 weeks, once every month, what have you. And also they're facilitating, the money's going to facilitate the trade. Well, the cartels, what they are doing is, and there's like a billion different flavors, and every different sector of the border is different on this. The cartels can do anything from guide you up, transport you up. You might have to pay a plaza boss to get through their territory. And, these migrants, these illegal immigrants, invaders, migrants, whatever term, you want to use, they have these cash cards essentially. So they have the money to generally float it, but not only that, but the cartels can take it on credit. So once these folks get here and they go into the interior, they're still beholden to the cartels. And, maybe they're coming here. Maybe you've got like a father who's got a family back home in Guatemala, what have you. He's going to be sending remittances back. But if he doesn't pay the cartel, his family dies. And so they've got a definite control over that. But one of the other things that they did, this was a boon for cartels, because one of the other things that they do in places like El Paso is they know that if they submit a large group of these folks, if they send them to the border, Border Patrol's they've got to intercede. They've got to do something with it. Mm-hmm. So what they will do out there is they will release one group at a time in different sectors. And then while all of Border Patrol is dealing with those, they'll funnel drugs through a different area.
Yeah.
So they're making money on drugs. They're making money on, people. Like the term that I heard used, everybody just kind of is in agreement that these folks are being used as chattel.
Yeah.
And in some instances, some of the smugglers are even fighting each other on our soil. On our soil, they're killing each other to be the one that gets to take these folks to wherever they're going.
They get kind of a sort of commission for how many people they bring into to this side. Is that part of it?
That's right. And it's been and it's just been amazing. Well, I mean, commission or like you get to take over their contract. I mean, it's just been a major horrific boon.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine. We'll obviously cartels don't do much accounting, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine if we ever find out how much they made during this period.
Yeah, it's insane, and I guess the worst part about it is, that the cost that we always hear these people pay, $5,000-$6,000, whatever it is per person, and everybody's like, where do they get that money? Well, they don't.
That's right.
They get over here, and then they are basically indentured servants until they pay it off.
That's right.
And so that's where the human trafficking comes into play, and so those people either have to go. I'm assuming they go work someplace where they can have control over them. I mean, they don't just let them go find a job. I'm imagining. What did you find on that?
On some of that, it was hard to track because once the adults come into the interior, oftentimes, our jurisdiction was the Rio Grande of the Red River. So once they left Texas, we couldn't really figure it out. I have found some folks. One of them was working for a roofer. I mean, I think that there should be an investigation down the road, or maybe even right now, into who is hiring these people, especially the ones that aren't bringing. Because on one end, you could see a business owner come through and be like, "Well, I'm just giving him a job because he doesn't have anywhere else to go." And then on the other end, you might look at it and be like, "Well, actually, there's a bunch of people here that are illegally," and then you might find out that he's keeping tabs on them for the cartel or their employer. Maybe he hired them. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that, but we need to look into it because there are a lot of folks that are going to be here that are, they are what you said, indentured servants.
Yeah, and I don't think we've done a really good investigation into the connection between employers and these folks so that to be pushed up here to work for basically nothing until they can pay off this huge debt, which they'll never pay off. And so they are always under the thumb of the cartel, or family is.
That's right.
I don't know that they would come into the U.S. to do. I guess they could, and they probably have. But really, you're worried about your own family back in Mexico or wherever you are, down south of the border.
Well, and then even if they got paid off, what comes next? Okay, we'll get my son up here, get my wife up here, whatever it is, get my grandma up here. I mean, we enabled the worst human trafficking crisis, and not we. State of Texas didn't enable anything, but it's just going to be it's going to be horrific. We're going to feel it for years.
We are going to feel it for years, and one of the things that we talked about that I don't know, I have no idea what's going to happen, but now that we're going to have sort of the next phase of this is the deportation process. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the same people that were involved in the migration of these folks into the U.S. illegally are going to be involved in the deportation of the same people, and the same money is going to be kind of rotating through the same people to get back, wherever they need to go back to, whichever country they're from or wherever. And have you come across anything or any information about how that's going to roll out? I know here in Texas there's been, I know that the land commissioner bought some property for to have a staging area, and then I don't hear a lot about that, but I know the governor's working really hard to try to figure out how to actually move people back over into south of the border.
I haven't heard anything about it, but I hate to be this cynical, but I assume I hope that that's not the case, but I assume that the folks that got them here will be they'll pop up and they'll be like, well, hey, we've got this area we can hold them in. And if it was, in my mind, if they've got deportation orders, it should be a facility wherever they are run by Border Patrol or USCIS, and they should get on a bus and they should go to the checkpoint, and then that's it. But, things being how they usually run, I assume that some of these folks will pop back up. And really, I think that that's why some of the stuff that's going on right now with the litigation needs to continue, because we need to get to the bottom of what hand these people played in getting them here.
Yeah.
So that way we know, hey, look, you're not going to get it on the way out too. I mean, and then there needs to be some accountability.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because you did talk about that, and that is that that some of these NGOs are currently in litigation with the Attorney General's office to find out, find out what did they do with the money and where did it go and how was it spent. Is that how is that going to roll out? I mean, some of these NGOs are, names of organizations that we hear all the time.
That's right.
And, if we, it's pretty easy for people to go and find out who those NGOs are, but it doesn't really matter. The real important point to know is, it's a big deal. I mean, whatever happens to those groups could affect their ability to do good stuff, but they've kind of gotten themselves into this whole process of working both sides of the border. I mean, it's a serious problem. And is it systemic amongst all of them, or is it just a few?
It's not systemic amongst all of them. There are some really good ones out there who, they are truly just solving the problem. Like, they're not in charge of letting people into this country. They're not in charge of getting them into the interior. They're just in charge of, like, hey, look, they're in our community and we've got to facilitate. And then there's a lot of others that are the bad actors. But even then, whenever the microscope got turned on, some of these other entities that were maybe thinking about dipping their toes in quickly pulled out and were like, hey, we don't want any part of this. And, I do think that there are some good folks out there, and even some of the bad actors. If I'm going to be completely candid, there are some bad actors out there that their benefactors have no idea what they are doing. There might, and the case in point, the case example I'll give, because I saw it several times, was you might have a church that's in the interior of Texas that is running a mission on the border. They're funding it, they're supporting it, whatever. You might have maybe some sort of missionary that runs that mission out on the border. But it's kind of like, I can't remember the phrase, like the cook doesn't know what the staff are doing in the kitchen, or there's too many mice, or whatever it is, but they're not aware of what their folks are doing. So you would have these activists working for these guys, or in some cases, the people that are running the mission themselves are the activists.
Yeah.
And then, there always seemed to be a cartel connection, or we found several cartel connections, or we couldn't disprove that there was not a cartel, or we couldn't disprove that there was a cartel connection. Like, it was just, especially even if you're hands off, like, if I'm running a cartel operation to make as much money as possible, and I know that this entity's there, that's part of my package.
How prevalent is it that the cartel's actually working on this side of the border? That closely with some of these groups, or are they still kind of arm's length?
I
didn't mean to interrupt. But I was thinking there's got to be some that are probably just plain bad actors. They probably are very closely tied, and there may even be people over here on this side. But how prevalent is that?
It's pretty bad.
Is it?
I mean, I would say that, like, and it's not. I think they're more or less staying on their side of the soil, but I do know that there are some towns in Texas, especially along the border, and and anyone can feel free to contradict me here, where the cartels are rolling around in blacked out SUVs with a full battle rattle of 7.62, AK-47s, and up arm, with bulletproof vests, and and it's just something to think about. Like, if you're a DPS trooper, or a border patrol agent, or what have you, or just a local cop, and you run up on one of these cars or one of these vehicles with 4 guys with 4 AKs and enough bullets to storm Ramadi or whatever, that's the end of you. I mean, there's no way to win that fight.
No, and why engage? You know what's going to happen, right?
That's it.
I mean, that's a problem. That's a serious problem. I didn't know it was that bad. I mean, we're getting ready to go down to the border region, and we're going to be talking to some folks that you gave us some great names, some sheriffs and some other folks, and we're going to go down to the border and actually, try to get deeper into this, because some of the people, and I got your name from a really good person, Kelly, and Kelly Perry, and shout out to Kelly. She's fantastic.
Super awesome individual.
She's amazing. And she was driving somewhere when I talked to her, and I mean, she talked to me for over an hour.
Yeah.
And I just kept taking notes, and so I really appreciate her giving me that information. But we want to go down there and kind of do a deep dive, because sort of to your point that you just mentioned a minute ago is somebody that's as involved as she is with landowners and everybody involved from DAs down the line. She had no idea how this deportation thing was going to roll out. And so it concerns me because that means there's going to be like major chaos, post January 20th.
Right.
So we kind of want to, if there's a way that we can cover that and bring, information to help, people like Kelly and other folks that are really trying to fix things down there.
That's right.
That's really what, State House is all about. That's what we've been trying to do. That's why we have people like yourself on.
And I appreciate that. And that's why, I wanted to come here, because I mean, we don't, like I said, all the opinions I've expressed, got to do another disclaimer, not the opinions of the Attorney General's office. This is Levi just talking about a case I used to work on and some stuff I used to do. And it was part of the impetus for me, if I can give a shout out to my current boss, I was just like, gosh, like we're not doing it. We're not, we just cannot, there's just too much. It's too much of a heavy lift. And, these folks are going to need, my colleagues and DPS and the Texas Military Department are going to need more. And then, through a mutual friend, I heard about Andy Hopper and I looked at his, I met him, I talked to him and his platform. I was like, here's let's go.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate.
Sounds like a wonderful guy. I haven't met him yet, and I'm looking forward to meeting with him.
He's the real deal, and so he was gracious enough to let me sign on with him, and and I'm hoping that this session will level out and we can actually
be fruitful.
That's what I'm hoping. But it is
that's a whole other issue. Yeah,
right. But it is one of those things that like I encourage everybody to go down there, because you can't. You have to go there to see it. And it is really funny. You mentioned Miss Perry. She's one of the sweetest people you ever meet.
Yeah.
And then you see what's going on in her town and what's going on in her community. I mean, like I went down there, as part of the work I was doing. I went to the border a couple times, and I remember she took me out to lunch with a couple other folks, the DA, the county attorney, some other folks. And it was just this really nice community out there. And then all of a sudden lunch bell rings and just a bunch of dudes in fatigues come in, and it was like a pre-deployment zone, because you've got a battalion of border patrol.
That's true. You got the National Guard, you got Border Patrol, you got DPS, you got everybody going on.
That's
down there.
Right. They're all out there, man, and there's a lot of good folks in this space. If I can give some names.
Yeah.
Like Mike Howell with the Heritage Foundation Oversight Project, Anthony Rubin with Muckraker. Another mention to I gave you his Twitter handle. I don't want to give his name because he didn't, but at RGV Truth on Twitter. Eamon Blair with Texas Public Policy, and then obviously Brent Smith and Sheriff Brad Coe, and Todd Bensman. I've already mentioned him, but there were just some people in this space who have been doing.
Well, Sheriff Boyd, who we're
Sheriff Boyd as well.
We're getting ready to go down and talk to him this week.
And then I'm going to do this, even though he doesn't live here, but Richard Manti from Florida, he was actually, this is something that is interesting, and I hope that we can bridge this gap. But Florida did so much work on the Texas border. Richard Manti. He is with the Attorney General's office, I believe, in Florida.
Okay.
But they did. Anyone can look this up. They did several presentments to a grand jury, outlining this problem, and so folks like our office, Representative Lance Gooden, we were able to see oh my gosh, Texas was slow to react, but so I do want to give him a special mention because he was just awesome in this space.
Well, it's going to take all those. It's going to take all of everybody in the area in this space working together to get to the next phase. I think the deportation stuff is going to be tough. And we're not going to get good coverage from the media on it. There's going to be awful stories, and it's going to make it look horrible. But at the end of the day, the people that are being used as chattel are humans.
That's
and
right.
It's not when you entice them to come over here and tell them, hey, we got this great deal. You're going to see, it's the American dream. And they get here and they want to turn around and go back because there's no American dream. I mean,
right.
they end up being in a worse situation because now they're beholden to the cartels because they spent that, or they essentially borrowed that money from the cartels to get here. And so it's an awful situation. So, and I know that y'all, I know that Representative Hopper is filing some bills this session. I've seen some others, dealing with the trafficking issue, dealing with the border.
Yes, sir.
I think it's going to be a busy set. You're going to be extremely busy this session.
It just one fight to the next. But yeah, and if I can touch on that, like I think you made a very poignant or a very important point is that, these folks don't, whenever they're wherever they're coming from, they don't know what the future is going to hold whenever someone comes and says, hey, would you like to go America? I mean, it's not Five Goes West.
Yeah.
It is horrific. It's tragic. I won't go into too much detail about, what happens to children, women, men on this trip. It is just.
Well, I mean, if you want to tell people, I mean, they need to know. I mean, if you want to give a few examples, I mean, it's awful to have to talk about it, but you know what? People need to understand it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, like, so there's a shoot. I hate to do it, but we're gonna go for it.
Go for it.
There's something. There's a couple trees. I think they're called the panty trees, where the underwear of young ladies who have been sexually assaulted. It's like a trophy for the guide. There's bodies down there. There's some, Anthony Rubin's right down there right now. He's showing where these people have ceased, and him and his brother actually did the entire trail. They videoed the whole thing.
I saw that video.
They almost died. They almost got killed by the cartel, right across the water from where SpaceX was, but they've got film of just corpses and bodies stacked up. I mean, you talk about like, I don't know how bad Guatemala is, but I highly doubt I highly doubt it is bad enough to put your child through that pack of nightmares.
Right.
And then, they get them whenever they come here. Like I said, we've already got the indentured servitude. We've already got the fact that they'll never get free. They'll never get out. That's if they even make it. Some of them, some of them might even get, if they can't afford it, well, the cartel's got another deal for you. Take some drugs across. And then now, what if you get picked up by the United States? And well, shoot,
a cartel doesn't care.
That's it. The cartel doesn't care.
Yeah.
And it's just there's no way that anyone in these places could have possibly known what they were going to get into. And there was a Bible verse that one of my really close friends gave me because this was a heavy lift for me, for several people I worked with, because there was a lot of really good folks that worked on this. And he said, even their mercy is cruel. And that's kind of just stuck with me because it was like these people get to come out, these NGOs or whoever, they get to come out and they say, look, we helped these folks get here. They're living the American dream. It's all great. And then all you have to do is just peel back one layer and it's just maggots, horrific. Like, I mean, what we did to what happened to these folks, and that is something I want to mention because, I know that like working for the AG's office, whenever I was doing this for the AG, it's like, oh, big bad old mean Ken Paxton is coming down here and he's just bullying these religious institutions. No, like there's 300,000 missing kids in the United States. Like there's 300,000. A third of a million are gone. We don't know where they are. Yeah. We don't know what state they're in. We don't know who they're with. We have no accountability. We don't know how to get them back. How is that good? And it is one of those things where you just, God, the longer you do it, the more you're just like, I can't believe. I mean, there's going to be books written about this in the future of one of the worst failures we've ever had.
Worst human failures in our history.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. There's what happens to women and children along the way, and then when they get here, it is just one horrific thing after the other. And why anybody would fight keep this going and not want to fix that problem, I don't understand. Makes no sense to me. I mean, if you've got, if you've got children or no children or have seen children, how would you think that, excuse me, what the cartels are doing should be protected in any way whatsoever? That's not humane.
That's right.
So, yeah.
And I mean, just, even the easy route, I would say not the easy route, but even some of the folks that made, one thing, I don't know if we talked about it, but folks need to understand that this whole USCPB get an appointment and get shuffled through thing, that doesn't apply to people who are coming here from Mexico. The Mexicans still have to kind of jump the fence and swim across or whatever.
So this is just Central and South America?
That's what they call them, special interest aliens, SIAs, I think, special interest aliens, yeah. And so, in some instances, some of these NGOs had been around for a long time, just always facilitating illegal immigration. It's just the spotlight wasn't on it because it's just sort of this old Texas thing of, it's like a joke or what have you. But, some of them were jumping the wall. They'd land on the other side, break their leg. And, and that's how welcome to America. That's how you start off. And then the cartels trick. Some of these folks wouldn't want to wait for the appointment. They'd rush the fence. We saw a video of that.
Yeah.
And that could have ended a completely different way. And
sure could have.
And because that is a military force that they charge. The military force has a right of self-defense. That could have ended with 30 dead bodies. It is a dangerous situation. And I hope that, I know Tom Homan, I've met him before. I know he's going to do a great job, and I hope that he has the staff and the people in that space to be able to make this, a necessary, I don't even want to call it an evil, but just a necessary action versus an absolute tragedy.
Well, it has to happen.
It's got to happen.
It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the people that are here.
That's right.
It's not good for the people that are citizens of the United States. They didn't ask to be overwhelmed with all these folks. I've been down to the Valley, during this time. We weren't doing any work on this podcast at the time, but you can just see everything is just overflowing with people. It reminds me a lot of after Katrina. I did some work with a client. We went to, we drove to Baton Rouge. There was no flights or anything, and we drove to Baton Rouge because the client that I had wanted to give money to the governor of Louisiana, and so we head to Baton Rouge and we stop, and nothing's open. But we had about 4 or 5 Suburbans, a bunch of us. And we weren't like any kind of, official group or anything. We were just going down there to do this. We stopped, and out of the woodwork, it was like zombies coming, from every corner because they thought we had, stuff, right?
Food, water.
And it reminds me of that because you got people that have zero and they're just looking for anything.
That's right.
How is that humane? It's not.
Well, you actually touch on something that I think this drove me nuts. A year ago, whenever we realized that a lot of these programs were being funded by the EFSP and they were being funded by FEMA, I turned to one of my colleagues and I was like, FEMA's going to run out of money. Because it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So if they don't run out of money, that's another problem.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of money. And I was like, FEMA's going to run out of money, and that was before Hurricane Helena.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden,
they start talking about that they're going to run out of money.
Well, that's it. And this was a year ago. I was like, there's no way that they're just handing out $9 million checks once every couple months or once every year. And that FEMA is going to have that because it's FEMA, right? So it covers the whole United States. So this was supposed to be a domestic application of federal funding, where they were supposed to help these border towns with a immigration crisis.
Yeah.
Well, instead, that money, whenever that money is not monitored, it's not watched, it's not supervised, it starts going south of the border. It just becomes like a sinkhole for money. Well, then you have Hurricane Helena where they get $700. And then of course there was this hemming and hawing. Oh, it's different. That's not the money. Well, and, everybody knows that there's pots,
Yeah.
right? But I'll
But they can move money.
They can
we
move.
all know they can move money.
That's right.
If you worked in government for any period of time, you know that money can be moved.
That's 100% correct. So it's just like, I'm not buying it, man.
No.
I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And that was just a completely foreseeable thing. And then, like I said, I guess since I'm leaving the agency and I'm going into the political sphere, I could just say, like, it's just like nobody gets held accountable for it.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to get fired. Well, actually, I take that back. With Donald Trump winning, people are going to get fired.
Yeah, there's going to be
going to be some firings.
Yeah, that's right.
But for that, nobody get fired. Nobody get looked at. I mean, what they did was just. I mean, aside from the human atrocity, like what we did to America, like neglecting Americans, what they did with the budget. I mean, it's just nuts. And we're all struggling from, and I usually don't talk about it too much, just because whenever I talk to folks about this, because it always, people just grab hold of it. But it is unfair for an American guy, American family to work, to do their 9 to 5, to just try to get their kids through school, and then these folks come up and they're just getting tons and tons.
Oh yeah.
Tons of money and tons of benefits, and it's like, oh, hey, welcome here. And I think that what people don't understand is, like, look, you might have one group that's offering this service. Okay, cool, they're fulfilling a need. But if you've got 5 or 10 groups, at a certain point, these people are, they're pretty well maintained. Now, granted, they're again indentured servants, but they have access to things that Americans don't have.
No, you don't automatically get those kind of things when if you're struggling and you're here in legally here in the U.S. You go find a job, you got to work, you still got to pay taxes, and no, I mean, if you talk to, I know people want to put the narrative out that people are racist and they don't like immigrants and all that, and that's all just bull, because I mean, both my sides of the family came from Mexico, and they immigrated here and they became citizens. Now that's a different world back then. I get that, so I don't need people commenting that it's not the same. But what I'm saying is that even people in the last 10, 20 years, I know are here. I know who they are. I know some friends, and they've come over. They're trying to go through the process. It's taken a long, long time, and it upsets them that someone just comes over and everything you need. You get a phone, you get everything you need.
Well, that's right. And then and it's like, one of the other kind of embellishments was like, well, these people are asylees, they're parolees. They'll have a hearing. No, they won't. I mean, and this is something I tell people. It's like, look, I've been an attorney for a little bit. If you handed me a piece of paper, all right, like I'm immigrating to Germany, whatever, you give me a piece of paper that's, it's in their version of English or it's in all in German, whatever it is, and you're like, hey, you've got a hearing, you need to be back here 7 years from now at 10:30 a.m. That ain't happening.
You're never going to find that paper.
That ain't happening. I mean, and they are so backed up, and that's been going on for a long time. Because I remember whenever I was in the Army, they were asking for folks they were asking for JAGs to come down and augment some of these hearings. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and that was a long time ago. So it's wild, because you see what the federal government said about some of this stuff, and you're just like, okay, like either they are just straight up lying through their teeth, or they just have no idea, or both. I think
it's pretty clear. I mean, if you thought any of that was true, I mean, then you weren't paying attention, because we see the result of that. Well, I'll tell you, I really, really do wish you and Representative Hopper the best of luck, and anything that we can do to help, promote the things that you're working on, and help with those issues is going to be. That's our what we'd like to do for you guys, if that's ever a possibility, and down the road, as your middle of session starts January 14th in less than 2 weeks, the next 5 months, we'd love to have Representative Hopper on, talk about those issues, because we're going to cover this issue all the way to the end.
Right. And
it's going to be, I think the first 2 years of this Trump presidency are going to be tumultuous, to say the least.
Oh,
and because then you start the campaign for the next presidential campaign starts up, after 2 years. So here we go. It's going to be tough.
That's right. The pressure's on, and Representative Hopper, he's going to fill this space. He's going to fight for it, and then a lot of the other incoming freshmen, everybody knows there's a problem, but the question is like, what are you ready to do to fix it? And with the Trump presidency, they really. Like, I try not to be too hyperbolic here, but they've got 4 years. I hope they get it squared away in 4, because it's going to be even worse if they don't.
Yeah, no, 100%. The only way it's going to work is they have to be very successful, and it needs to lead to another Republican in the next 4 years. And since he can't run, it's going to be problematic, right?
That's
so, a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
but you seem up for it, and I'm really happy to have you on the show. We really appreciate all the time you gave us today.
I really appreciate it, and I want to thank y'all. I know this is going to be a great series. I want people to know. I want people to know about this, because not enough do. A lot of people think they do, but not enough do know.
100% agree, and that's the main reason for having people like yourself on. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.